Hey, everybody. I'm Jesse.
This is Jake.
And I'm Adam, and I'm out of witty things to say.
And this is Boring Conversation.
Welcome to Boring Conversation, a Malifaux podcast.
All right, everybody. We have our long-awaited content reveal. Wyrd, of course, was good enough to get in touch with us, send us some teasers for some new masters and models, and we are here to share that with you. But before we do that, let's get intros from our guests today. So, I, Jesse, am joined by Adam, as ever, and our friend Jacob. Say hi to everybody, folks.
Hi, everybody, folks.
Oh, you stole my line. Come on.
I'm on top of it.
So, before we really get going, one thing I wanted to say, and I know that a couple of other content creators have said this when they've recorded their episodes, but I really want to thank Wyrd for taking the initiative to really embrace the content creator community. I know that there are some other game companies who shall remain nameless who have done quite the opposite lately, that have kind of ostracized a lot of their content creators. And I mean, let's be real, that the content creators are the most enthusiastic people, the most enthusiastic fans, I should say, and the ones that really help drive the community. And I mean, free marketing probably isn't such a bad thing either, right? So thank you, Wyrd. You guys are doing a great job. I'm really happy with the opportunity to share some of these new models with the general public.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and we're going to be releasing kind of on the tail end of the various reveals. So the next content reveal, and the final one, as far as I'm aware, is going to be by the YouTube channel Boletsky. That's going to be on Friday the 10th. So make sure that you tune in for that, and we'll make sure that we share it in the show notes. So before we get into the actual content itself, I have to, of course, share the same disclaimer that you've heard several times at this point. I'm going to put on my best radio voice for this. So, all right. This material was provided to us for review by Wyrd Miniatures. The views and opinions expressed throughout the content are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy, position, or opinion of Wyrd Miniatures. How was that?
Hey,
Pretty good?
That was pretty good. Yeah. I think
Awesome.
we got a side gig for you.
All right. So next up, of course, the ever popular "What Are You Drinking" segment. So, Jake, why don't you start us off?
I am drinking a Troegs Double Blizzard IPA.
That is not a beer that I have had. Troegs is a fantastic brewery, and I love double IPAs. So that's all I
don't
have
know
to
why
say
I'm
about
drinking
that.
a double IPA. Maybe I decided I needed to get drunk to do this. Maybe there's a reason for that. I don't know. We'll see in a minute.
Maybe. Adam, how about you? Are you on call tonight, Adam?
I am not on call.
You are not on call.
I'm not on call. No,
Awesome. What are you drinking
I'm
tonight,
vacation.
Adam?
I'm having, right now, I'm having a Crown Vanilla and Root Beer, sir.
That sounds pretty dope.
It's pretty amazing.
I'm kind of a sucker for Crown. My brother-in-law really likes the Crown Maple, and it's kind of dangerous.
Crown Peach. Crown Peach is my jam. Crown Peach and lemonade.
And he's Canadian, so he always has it. He lives right across the street from me. It's it can lead to some messiness. Yeah. All right. So I myself am drinking a homebrew, which I haven't drunk on the show for a little while now. This is one that me and my buddy Tim from my brew club brewed for a club competition. It is a rye. It is a German Bock style lager with rye and green and black peppercorns. So, beer geek trivia time. Bocks are a German lager style that's usually a little bit higher alcohol, but not like a deep, rich, like chewy beer. They're still relatively well balanced. You can usually find Doppelbocks pretty easily. Those are usually going to have like a goat on the label, and usually you've seen like Celebrate or Doppelbock at the store, and it has like a little plastic goat charm hung around the neck. This is a regular Bock, which is a lower alcohol and a lighter beer. But we added a little bit of rye, which is going to give it a little bit of a kind of like an earthy note. And it's going to kind of crisp it up just a little bit. And then the green and black peppercorns we used in place of the normal amount of hops that would go into it. So it still has some baseline level of hops, but the bitterness and counterbalance to the sweetness is provided by the peppercorns instead. So there you go. Long-winded discussion about beer. It's pretty good. I could have just said that. It's a pretty good beer. But yeah, so speaking of beer, I think it's about time we get into the content reveals. What do you say, folks?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we're gonna bury the lead a little bit. We're just kind of gonna drop the hint on the last reveal, which I'm pretty sure a lot of you can figure out at this point. But we're gonna start with our first master, which is Youko Hamasaki, Unseen. So, taking a look at the card art, what do you guys think?
When I first saw this card art, I was super psyched. She looks awesome. Total departure from the original Youko. I mean, she's a straight up ninja. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, I immediately thought Deadly Little Miho from Sin City. That's 100% right where my head went.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I love the pose. It's really dynamic. I think it's going to fill a 30 mil base really, really well. The original Youko is a great model, but she's kind of just standing up straight, and she's very thin, so she tends to kind of like disappear a little bit on the 30. This one's a really dynamic pose. Me and Jake were talking before the podcast, and I'm really hoping that the little tassels hanging off the back of her waist aren't going to be too much of a nightmare to assemble. But yeah, overall, great model. I can't wait to get her on the table some more. And just as a quick little spoiler to everybody, we did actually manage to get games with these. So I ended up playing a game with Youko, her support model, and the other master who is as of yet to be named. And actually, before we get too far into this, one thing I forgot to mention off the bat is that we're doing something a little bit different with this content reveal. So what we're going to do for this episode is kind of a traditional reveal. We'll talk maybe just a little bit about how our games went with the new masters and new models. And we'll go through the abilities one by one and provide our hot takes and stuff. I wanted to get a little bit deeper into it, though, so I actually called in a couple of ringers, and we're going to be putting out another episode next Monday, which is going to have a second level play deep dive style podcast with Mae Fox, who you've all heard before, and another guest who shall remain nameless at this point. So, that said, let's talk about Yoko's rules. So, looking at the front of her card, she's got a phenomenal stat line, 6s across the board, 6 defense, willpower, and move. 11 wounds, kind of an unusual number. But we've seen some masters come in with some kind of unusual wound counts. We've seen a couple of 10s. We've seen, I don't know if we've seen a 13. I think we may have. But suffice it to say, she sits at 11. Going through the front of card abilities, so first off, we have Cunning Patience. If this model is the crew's leader during the start phase, its crew gains 2 pass tokens. Big thing of note on this is that original Youko had Leverage, which is the ability where when you're in the start phase, you gain a pass token for for your opponent's revealed schemes, and then you could discard pass tokens for positive flips. This Youko does not have that ability. She instead just gives you a flat 2 pass tokens. Which being guaranteed 2 pass tokens on turn 1, I think I can speak for everybody on the podcast, is pretty incredible.
I'm sure we'll get more into it, but pass tokens are huge. Yeah. Although, it's not nothing that she loses the ability to use them to get positive flips.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit, but yeah, it's kind of a big deal that she can't trade them in for positives anymore. Next up, we have Incriminating Evidence. After an enemy model ends its activation within an 8-inch aura, this model may discard a pass token or a card to have the enemy model gain Distracted 1. So this kind of plays into a lot of the mechanics that are going to be on the card. We're going to find that this is a master that uses Distracted as a resource. That's going to become apparent as we read some of the rest of the abilities. We've seen a lot of masters that rely on conditions or terrain markers come up with these title reveals. I think we'll find that this one, instead of just handing out Distracted, like maybe Old Colette or English Ivan or something like that, it's kind of cool because, as I mentioned, she's actually using it as a resource. It's a fairly steep cost to give out the Distracted. I think that in me and Jake's game, I don't think I used this ability even once. And part of that was just forgetfulness on my part, but discarding the pass tokens of the card is a relatively high cost. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it's definitely a situational thing, but I mean, pass tokens are great to be used as pass tokens. I mean, activation control is how you win games and score points. So giving those up to give someone Distracted, a lot of times it's not worth the price. The fact that she has the option to discard a card instead is good because, I mean, you're going to have a couple trash cards in your hand, and the keyword doesn't really need to discard a lot of cards. I mean, there are a few things that we might talk about, like that you discard cards for, but for the most part, if you have trash cards in your hand and you're using them to hand out Distracted, that's great. I don't think very often you're going to use the pass tokens.
Well, the thing is, too, it can be cards too, and we'll see later on. We'll see later on when we're looking at the actions, particularly. When we get to Information Broker, we'll see that it doesn't matter if you discard 2 stud cards or two cards.
True.
You'll just be able to pick them back up again.
If it wasn't for the discard a card thing, I would say this is not a good ability. But maybe I'm overvaluing pass tokens. But I mean, being able to use discard cards to get Distracted, great.
Cool. Yeah, you're always going to have low cards.
Yeah. And this crew values pass tokens even more than some others because it uses them for the normal things you use pass tokens for, but then it can also use them for clutch positive flips to get around things like concealment, serene countenance, stuff like that. So I think that you both have good points there. So kind of moving on a little bit, for defensive tech, she has Slippery. That's an ability that we've only seen on, I think, 2 other models at this point. I think Corvus Rook and the Grave Goo have it. But essentially it reads, this model can only be engaged or targeted by melee actions from enemy models in base contact with it. So pretty straightforward, very strong ability, but not something that's necessarily going to keep her on the table.
What's really nice with it, though, is because it's base contact to be engaged base contact, and she also has a 0-inch engage. Mm-hmm. I mean, she can interact really right in the thick of everything.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if they ever put out a model with a 1 or a 2-inch engage that also has Slippery. We'll see. That seems like it might be kind of busted. But yeah, she can operate even in the thick of it, to your point, with relative impunity, especially if there's bases that are even blocking her slightly. Just enemies trying to get into base contact with her is difficult.
It's kind of a lesser don't mind me. But also your crew has a decent amount of models that have a 2-inch engage. So that having those models around her combined with having to be in base contact, that can make it really hard for your opponent to actually get in there if they don't have leaps or something like that.
Right. And moving on to her next defensive ability, she's got Stealth, which I don't need to go into great detail about. But yeah, so you can't shoot her off the table first turn. It's tough to get her into combat, and she's got a bunch of big models and big bases that are screening her. Plus, she has defense willpower 6. I think that if your opponent manages to get a dedicated beater into her, she's going to be in trouble. But she's fairly well protected by the rest of her crew and by Slippery, so it may be very difficult to actually get a model in striking range of her. But if something gets to her, she's going to be in trouble. Next ability we've got is Whispered Lies. Once per activation, When another friendly Qi and Gong model takes an action, it may add any one suit to its duel if enemy models within a 4-inch aura of it have a total combined distracted value of 2 or greater. So this is amazing.
It's a table-wide ability for every Qi and Gong model.
Yep.
That's
Yep, you're
awesome.
absolutely right.
And
no
and
line of sight, no range, no nothing. It just depends on models near them.
And it's a cumulative value, distracted value. So that's 2 models with distracted 1 on it. It's 1 model with distracted 2. So there's a bunch of different ways to get that.
Yeah, and if for anybody who's not familiar with Qi and Gong, there are a lot of very powerful triggers in the keyword, and being able to get those suits on your minions and enforcers and stuff that really rely on them to punch damage out is I can speak for any other Youko players out there and say that ability is amazing. So that wraps up her front of card. Did you guys have any other additional thoughts before we move on to the back?
Not really. I think it's got some pretty powerful front of the card abilities. I mean, Whispered Lies is powerful just simply because it's table wide. It's not line of sight. It's pretty much giving every model in your crew an extra benefit, and that's always good. That passive buff is always really good. Incriminating evidence could be clutch at certain times, especially as we'll see later on, using distracted for things, but also being able to get those triggers off and put out distracted without having to use AP to do it.
Yeah, and looking at this front of card, I mean, you've got 2 abilities that are basically table-wide buffs, Whispered Lies and Cunning Patience. Like, doesn't matter where she is, you're getting a benefit out of that. And then you've got 2 good defensive abilities for keeping her in the back line. So, looking at just the front of card, I'm thinking, okay, she needs to stay away from the fight, but she's going to be adding some good buffs, An 8-inch aura on the incriminating evidence. I mean, 8 is pretty big on a Malifaux table. So, she can be behind your big beaters and still passing out distracted.
Yeah, I mean, the difference between a 6 and an 8-inch aura is pretty significant. It doesn't seem like it would be, but it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say is, so far overall, I've really loved all the masters that we've been seeing. And one thing I really like about them is they offer a different play style. And they usually there's some benefit to taking things that you wouldn't normally take. So, models that never see the table are all of a sudden going to see the table, and you're going to be able to play that same master you've been playing for 3 years, but you're going to be able to play a different style. I'm not sure that Youko is doing that. I'm not sure that her list is changing, and I'm not sure that you're playing her any differently.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. After having played her once, it's only one game, but still, I've done some chatting with our other mystery guest as well, and it seems like initially we gravitated towards some very different lists with some models that we wouldn't usually take, and then we find ourselves slowly backsliding to very similar lists with just a different way of augmenting those lists. But
it's kind of funny in a way, because part of the problem is that her keyword is just so good that like, it doesn't matter what you give for her, those other models are still that good. They're still going to be the same models you've always taken. So, I mean, it's a weird thing to complain about, like, oh, you've got this awesome crew, but and I mean, we should get into the back card before we start saying she plays the same way, but that was kind of the impression I got.
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to say she plays the same way, but yeah, let's go through the back of the card, and then we'll wrap up our thoughts after that. So she has 1 attack action. It's Backstab, range 0, stat 7 against defense. Target suffers 2, 3, 4 damage, ignoring armor. This model may reduce the target's distracted condition by up to 2 to have it suffer an equal additional amount of damage. And she has a single trigger on it for reposition. Move this model up to 3 inches. So the first time that I looked at this ability, I said, holy smokes, that is super busted. She has a min 4 attack. with a decent damage track on a stat 7. And then I played her, and I realized how finite that distracted resource is. It's a very strong attack. I think that it's the worst ability on her card, even though on the surface it may seem super, super good. But what do you guys think?
I agree. I think, without spoiling the rest of her abilities, the problem is that the only way she gets where she's going is to walk or charge. There's no movement tricks. Am I wrong? Are there other models that can maybe move her?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of models in Keyword that have lures, but that's relatively inefficient because then you're walking up into place and then you're using another AP to move the model. Like, it's more of an AP trade than anything.
Yeah. I mean, she has some amazing tactical actions, and every time you're walking, you're not taking a tactical action.
I don't think you're walking though, right? So I think you're never walking. I think you're using gather intel.
Well, so that's the problem, Adam. If you're not walking, then you're never going to be using your backstab.
You gather intel through them and then engage everybody. You pulse out a bunch of distracted, and then you start attacking.
Let's talk about gather intel.
So it's kind of important.
It is kind of important. So gather intel is the first of her tactical actions. Tactical meaning she can target herself, which is important to remember. So it's an 8-inch range. Stat 6 needs a 10 to go off. Stat 6 with a TN of 10, so it needs a 4 to go off. Friendly only. This action cannot target the same model more than once per activation. Push the target up to 5 inches in any direction, ignoring other models. Enemy models within a 2-inch pulse of the target must pass a TN 13 willpower duel or gain distracted 1. And then she has a mask trigger for cut them down. The target may take a melee action. And she's got a tome trigger for draw out secrets. Drop a scheme marker into base contact with the target.
Yeah, so I mean, as long as you've got a low mask, you're not going to be walking. You're going to be low masking in so you can push 5, possibly pulse out a bunch of distracted, and then making an attack.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you need to move her, there's no reason not to do this. It's such a low target number. But at the same time, why are you doing this to her when you could do it to a Kabuki or to Bill?
Because you can do it to both of them. You can do it to all of them. You just can't target the same model, So, I mean, you realistically could just do it to Kabuki, but also because you kind of want to get her into attack, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
late game. I mean, late game you can bring her in and she can polish things off pretty good.
This ability is crazy on a Kabuki because when they take that willpower duel, they're on negative flip. So
yeah. Kabuki warriors, for anybody who's not familiar with them, have a distraction aura. Where any enemy models within a 2-inch aura of them suffer a negative flip on willpower duels. Geisha also have the same ability. So, yeah, I mean, you're pushing a 40 mil Kabuki through a couple of models, hopefully, pulsing out a TN13 willpower duel to give distracted that your enemy is on a negative flip for, and you're hitting your mask trigger to give them an attack. And their great sword gives them a positive flip on damage for any attacks not generated by a charge. And their triggers don't matter, so you don't care that you're missing them.
Well, you're not going to miss them, though, because they're probably going to get too distracted out there with the negative flips, and then you can...
Well, you can't declare triggers because the attack's generated by a trigger.
Yeah, but when that Kabuki's going to go,
yes,
all of a sudden there's distracted everywhere, and he's able to cheat in those. So that's pretty solid.
Yeah, it's pretty solid.
It's really good. It's really good in general, but with Kabuki warriors, it's like seems like what it's made for.
Even just pushing a Geisha if you had to, because your opponent's still going to be on the negative flip to gain distracted, and they do have a melee attack that gives slow and has a couple of other decent triggers. So, like, if you don't have any other models that you can target, there are worse things that you could do than gather intel on a Geisha. Yeah, for sure. So, moving on to her next tactical, we've got Information Broker. Once per turn, so you know it's probably going to be good. Discard up to 2 cards, and then choose an equal number of non-Joker cards in this model's discard pile to draw. Then, 1 non-leader enemy model within 3 inches, not even an aura, just within 3 inches of this model or a friendly Youko Hamasaki, that's her totem, gain Distracted 1. So this ability is bananas. You're trading an AP to ditch 2 junk cards and pick up 2 face cards from your discard pile and give up Distracted without a resist.
And hey, you don't even flip for it.
You don't even have to flip for it. I didn't mention that. There's no flip. It just happens.
It just happens. If you decide to spare an AP to do it, it happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty good.
Pretty good. I don't really think there's too much more to add on that one, unless you had anything, Jake.
I mean, no, you're doing this every turn, right?
Yeah, it's kind of amazing.
Yeah,
That's why it's once per turn. And then her one and only bonus action.
Oh,
and
actually,
go ahead.
Sorry, Jesse. I do have one thing to say about it.
Sure.
Because you're taking cards out of your discard, it is affecting when in the turn you're going to want to activate Youko. Because obviously, if you're activating her first, you're not going to get anything out of this. So that is just something to keep in mind when we talk about all of her abilities and how they interact together. Like this, the later you are activating her, the more you're going to get out of this.
Hey, real quick.
Yeah.
There's a reason to take Terracotta Warriors.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can do that, can't you?
Yeah, and it doesn't even matter. The negative, what do you call it?
What do you call it? The -2 on the stat.
The -2 on the stat doesn't matter because it just happens.
That's a very good point.
Oh, yeah, that's solid. Wow,
that's really good. And now you don't have to use a Youko AP to do it.
Oh, and also amending what I just said. I mean, if you're taking her other actions first, then cheat in the 12 to gather intel just to get the suit. Because you're just going to pick it back up.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So you would go first with her to get
you
just cheat everything in.
Yeah, exactly.
And then just get it back. There's really no loss to it.
I don't know how I never thought about the Terracotta Warrior thing when I was building crews, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
That's wicked good.
The reason I just thought of it was because I was actually looking at Pandora, because I'm switching over to Pandora, and I was thinking about, why don't I just take a changeling with her, and the changeling can push around the woes and give them the suits they need and all that stuff, and it's a changeling, and there's no cost for it. So when I saw Information Broker, it's such a good tactical action. I was like, it sucks it takes up one of her AP, but if something else could do it, it'd be perfect.
So moving on to her remaining her remaining action, which is her only bonus, and I think this might be the action that makes your opponent want to flip the table if it plays out correctly. It's Hidden Ledger. So it's a 7. Stat 7 needs a 12. So you're looking for a 5. Reveal the top 7 cards of the opposing player's fate deck and discard all cards of any one suit. Then shuffle any remaining cards back into that deck. It's got 2 triggers. On a mask, it has Black Stain. Choose any one non-Joker card discarded by this action and remove it from the game. And then on a crow, Mind Games. When resolving, set aside up to 3 revealed cards. After shuffling the fate deck, place the set aside cards back on top in any order. So this ability is, in the game that Jake and I played, this is the ability that got the most use. I mean, it's a bonus action, she's going to do it every turn, but every single time that she used it, it was impactful and significantly impactful.
So something to keep in mind with this ability and with Information Broker, it doesn't matter where you are on the table. A little bit with Information Broker, but that's not the important part. And, gather intel can be done from way in your back line. Like all of these abilities, you don't need to be anywhere near your opponent, which is kind of awesome. An interesting thing came up in our game. First time you did this, one of the 7 cards was the Red Joker. I don't know if we are certain on this, but the way we interpreted it is the Red Joker is one suit of my choice. So I had to declare a suit for it, and then you could choose to discard that suit.
Right. So I'm not sure if we did it right. When we read it in the rulebook, it's exactly what Jake said, where in the rulebook, it just says that the Red Joker has any one suit of the owner's choice. So Jake made it like a tome, which I think it was the only tome that was in the stack of cards that we revealed. So, of course, I discarded that. and then I use the other triggers to, to their effect. I think in the game that you and I played, I never used Black Stain once.
You didn't. And, it's funny. Before we played the game, I read the ability, and my first gut reaction was, oh my God, Black Stain is so gross. It's so broken. I'm not going to have any 13s in my deck. But then I thought about it a little bit more, and I'm like, no, it's mind games. It's mind games every single time.
Yeah, I mean, I made a point to go for mind games every single time. It's one of those that, like, I feel like, again, this goes into the whole timing thing with Youko, where the timing of when you use Hidden Ledger is going to be very, very important. If you feel like you're going to be setting up for some big gather intels with some attacks on Kabuki's or Bill or whatever else you're using, then you probably want to use Hidden Ledger early and hit the mind games trigger. If you're using it later in her, because like the rest of her abilities aren't super impactful. So like if you use Hidden Ledger, Information Broker doesn't require a flip. Backstab is decent, but it's in my opinion more of a finishing move. You've stacked up some Distracted, so finally Youko jumps into the fray, burns some Distracted, takes a big focus swing and hits for 6. So you can kind of set that up. But really what you're doing is you're setting up the attacks that you're getting off of Gather Intel, or you're setting your opponent up to flip badly on their activation.
I was thinking about this the same way, Jesse, and I was thinking what in the faction has companion, because the companion lets you discard to activate immediately after. Nothing in the faction has companion. So, because if it did, that would be amazing, because you Hidden Ledger and then you go into your big beater, and then your big beater takes 2 or 3 swings, and that they're going to flip 2, 4, 5 or whatever, and that would be amazing. You can't do that, but fortunately, what you do have is an abundance of pass tokens. So you can pass token until your opponent is out of activations. Then Youko can Hidden Ledger, set up their Fate deck so that they're going to have 3 low cards, and then you can activate Bill and just wreck anything you want.
Right. Go to town. Exactly. Yeah. Having that degree of activation control is a big deal.
I think Youko can do it as well. I mean, obviously not for the big targets, but I mean, when I was looking at her initially, I was thinking along the lines of total role reversal, like we were talking about earlier, right? Like, instead of being a support, she's going to be more of a hitter. And I do think that she can scalpel. I think if you set it up right and you really spam and stack the Distracted on a single target, that you can then Hidden Ledger, send her in and get 3 attacks off that he's going to fail the defense duel.
Yeah, you definitely can. So the only things that I found are that with Chi and Gong, it's much like handing out the Distracted is much, much, much less reliable. And it seems like you have to get to a floor of Distracted. You have to have 3 or 4 Distracted out on critical enemy models. And then once you get to that level, now you start getting all your built-in beautiful clothes triggers on your attacks to hand out even more Distracted, and it starts stacking up like crazy. But until you get to that floor, it's actually relatively difficult to get out an appreciable amount of Distracted. And that's kind of what ended up happening in me and Jake's game.
The problem with Distracted and with Whispered Lies, the ability that gives you the suit if they have Distracted, is that your opponent has a degree of control over that, because there is a lot of different ways to get rid of Distracted. You can assist to get rid of it. You can, focus to get rid of it. You can attack to get rid of it. You can move that model away so that they're not in the 4-inch aura. So it's good. It's definitely good. But like you said, it's not super easy to initially get it all out. And your opponent does have some play.
Yeah. And like people, I swear, like every time I play a condition-based crew that can be affected by this, I don't think I've ever actually seen any opponent except those that have like models with quick cure, like Doc in Parker's crew or Sun Kwang, use the assist action. And the assist action, you're literally trading an AP for a 1-2-3 flip to reduce distracted, and it's very easy to reduce that distracted to 0. I mean, throwing a 6 to reduce a model from distracted 2 to distracted 0 is a big deal. And it's something that I think if your opponent remembers to do it, it won't necessarily pull the teeth out of this crew, but it'll make it much less efficient at what it does.
But at the same time, I mean, AP wins these games. And the more AP that you have to score and that they don't have because they're spending AP to remove distracted, you're still winning.
It's true, but like you look at it in the other hand, like say you have a model in combat that's a high priority model that you have some distracted on. So if you need to do something impactful with that model, your only choices are to focus when you're going to remove one distracted, or use another model that has like Dispel Magic or an assist action. And for the assist, you may have to walk up to it. So you might be trading potentially 2 AP to remove all of that model's distracted, but then that model is set up to have an impactful activation afterwards. You're right that AP wins games, but it's not like poison. It's not like stunned or staggered where any enemy model can't just walk up and remove those.
Yeah, but I mean, you're also getting a lot of this distracted off by kind of not by simple duels, which is already either destroying their hand because they have to pass them, or they're not passing them and it's distracted out. I mean, either way, and usually those are free actions. So I mean,
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
They're free actions that you're pushing in. So I mean, you're really not losing anything out. It's more of an environmental hazard that the person playing against you is going to have to deal with. You know, you're gonna have to cheat cards in to pass those duels. You're gonna have to live with the fact that distracted's out there. I think it's win-win either way.
That's a fair point. So it sounds like we're pretty much all set with Youko. So you guys ready to move on to our next model?
Yeah, I would say my hot take, as someone who has absolutely zero authority talking about 10 Thunders, is she's cool. She's got like a cool stuff going on, lots of cool card manipulation. But at the end of the day, if I show up to the table and someone has taken Youko 2 instead of Youko 1, I'm happy. I would rather fight this Youko than the other one any day. The other one is a ball buster.
Yeah, I kind of love original Youko for sure. I don't think I'm at a point where I can say that one is necessarily better than the other. They're pretty close in my book. I think that this version of Youko is going to require a lot more practice. The other one is a bit more forgiving. But yeah, this one I think is going to need some reps for sure.
Yeah, I got nothing. I mean, I think, like I said, I think she's a change of pace from Youko sure. 1. And I don't know. I mean, it's going to come down to list chicken with a lot of these now because you're going to have titles of masters at two totally different things. So, I mean, against armor, she's awesome.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
yeah,
situation
for sure. Yeah, I mean, if you can stack some distracted on an armor 2 model and really just tear into them, yeah,
she can kill a peacekeeper on one turn.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, that's a big deal. All right, so let's get on to our next model. We have Shojo. It is Qian Gong and drumroll Tri Chi.
No way.
No way.
Brewmaster, I don't believe it.
Oh, yeah. So let's talk about Shojo first before we get into Brewmaster, because I'm going to wax poetic about him. So Shojo is a cost 6 enforcer. Defense 5, willpower 4, move 5, size 2. She had and real quick, I did a little bit of Googling on what Shojo is. So it is a bit out of Japanese folklore. It is a water spirit who typically has red face, red hair, and is known to enjoy alcohol quite a bit. So there's your little history lesson for the day. So getting into that, first front of card ability, High Tolerance. You see this on Brewmaster Tri-Chi models. Reduce all damage this model suffers from poison to 0. Pretty easy. It's got Incorporeal. It also has Trade Secrets. At the end of any model's activation, this model may reduce the value of its own poison condition by 3 to gain a pass token. So you're already going to be getting a lot of pass tokens in Youko, especially Youko 2, where you're automatically starting with 2 pass tokens. One thing that's kind of a big deal is that this card gives access to pass tokens mid-turn at any point that you want, and you can really catch your opponent by surprise. Like, let's say you're getting down to the last couple of activations of a turn. They're trying to push things off to score a point. They've got maybe 1 model left. At the end of any model's activation, Shojo says, oh, I'm going to gain a pass token. It can really throw your opponent for a loop, and it gives access to pass tokens to Bayou, who previously did not have any access to pass token generation whatsoever. So I think that this is an ability where, when timed correctly, could possibly deny your opponent some points, which is a big deal. I mean, that's the thing you want to see on any kind of model, never mind a support model.
Yeah, I'll talk more about this when we get to the end of the card and just some hot takes on her. But
Fair enough.
I think it works better for one side than the other.
I mean, activation, like we said, activation control is how you win the game. And you made a good point, Jesse. Like, it's going to cost them a point. And one thing people don't think about is that costing them a point is just as good as you gaining a point.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's really good for a 6-point model.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that it's the big thing there, and I don't want to, reiterate this too much, but the mid-turn, literally almost any time you want ability to gain a pass token without spending an AP, and by spending a resource that you're going to have plenty of with the poison, it can't be overstated. It's not like you're starting the turn with an extra pass token or 2 because you traded in some poison with her. You're doing it anytime you want. So moving on to the next ability, we've got Red in the Face. Once per activation, after an enemy model within a 6-inch aura fails a willpower duel, this model may gain poison 1 or have the opposing model gain poison 1. So this really plays into the whole Youko thing with all those gather intel checks, handing out distracted, especially because you're going to be at a negative flip for a lot of them. But yeah, this is an ability that, quite frankly, I forgot about quite a few times. I don't really think I used it more than once or twice. But it's certainly very, very strong.
And as we'll see on the back of her card, she has many ways to make you fail willpower duels.
Yes. So let's get right to the back of card then. Oh, go ahead, Adam. Did you have something?
Yeah, I think it's important. I think this one's important, particularly for her, more in. I think it's more important when she's played into Qi and Gong than it is Tri-Chi, because it's gonna. Yeah. You'll see eventually that's gonna be what gets her to 3 poison to be able to get that pass token off.
Yeah, there's not very many willpower duels in a Tri-Chi crew, but there are quite a few in Qi and Gong, and this is going to be her one of her most reliable ways to access poison on herself. So yeah,
we're gonna see later on when we're looking at the other actions that you can get poison on her fairly easy. You need that sweet spot of 3, and that's where you're gonna need to get it.
Right. So moving right onto the back of card, we've got her attack action, Have a Drink. Quite a few Tri-Chi models have this one. It's a 2-inch engage, big deal. Stat 5 against willpower. So that's one where if your opponent fails the duel for this, they're going to gain poison 2 for the ability, which is the effect of it. Target gains poison 2, and they're going to gain another poison for Red in the Face on the front of her card. Or she's going to gain a poison. So it's got no damage track. It just gives poison 2. It has 3 triggers. Beautiful Clothes, target against distracted 1. Drunken Stumble, push this model 1 inch in any direction. And Fussy Company, enemy only. This model may take the Boring Conversation action, which receives a positive flip to its duel. Boring Conversation being one of her 2 bonus actions. So, I mean, this is a solid ability. It's 2-inch engage, hands out poison, potentially 3 poison. The real money ability on this one is the ability to actually take both of your bonus actions in a turn. It's still a little bit of a trade-off, because when we get to Boring Conversation, we'll see that it's got some pretty good triggers. You wouldn't be able to declare those if you take it using this trigger. But yeah, it's pretty strong.
Sorry, Jesse, you can still take Boring Conversation again, right? You could?
I don't know. I guess you could, in theory, take it
Right.
twice. I would have to check into that. I don't know.
And one thing to note, I mean, she's an enforcer, so she's not stoning for any of these triggers, but she's got triggers on 3 out of 4 suits, and they're actually all really good. Drunken Stumble might not seem good. Push your model 1 inch, but when we get into Brewmaster, we'll see that it actually is.
Yeah, exactly.
So just believe us that she has 3 triggers that are all good.
Yes.
Well, I mean,
and if you, go ahead, Adam.
Have a drink on a Moonshiner with a low tome. I mean, you get poison 2 and distracted off.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I guess actually a 1-inch push on a model with a 2-inch engage is actually a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a baby butterfly jump.
Yeah.
Which
is why, again, I mean, we'll revisit this later, but I think that's why this one tends to do more in one crew than the other.
Yeah. So her next attack action is going to be Biting Insult. It's a range 6, stat 6 on willpower. Again, another willpower attack. Enemy only. Target gains distracted 1. If the target has not yet activated this turn, this model's crew gains a pass token. And then it has a single trigger on a ram making conversation. 1 friendly model within 3 inches may heal 2. So that is a super strong ability. As we're going to see with her 2 bonus actions, both having auras that last until the end phase, this is a model that you're probably going to want to activate very early in the turn. So handing out Distracted at the top of the turn and gaining pass tokens and handing out flat 2 heals, this is a very, very strong ability.
Yeah.
Not much to add there.
I don't know what more you want me to say.
You
So, yes.
And I mean, if you're playing her with Youko, then there's a chance that you have that suit for free, you know?
Exactly.
Other than that, I mean, you know, again, it's an enforcer and it's an opposed duel, so chances are you're not reliably getting that suit, but it's not the kind of attack you want to cheat in a 12 to make sure it goes off, you know?
No, definitely not. Yeah, I mean, neither of her 2 attack actions are critically important, aside from maybe if you have the high enough crow to get to have a drink off, you might want to consider budgeting that for it, because you really want to be able to get both of those 2 bonus actions off. So let's get to the bonus actions.
Yeah, I mean, also, I'm sorry. I think ultimately you're going to use half a drink. You're going to use half a drink when you use North Tri Chi. You're going to use Biting Insult when you're using your Key and Dog.
It seems that way.
That's what you're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, potentially. I mean, frankly, I'm looking at him and I probably want to go for a have a drink with a crow every turn if I can get it, but maybe that's just me not budgeting my resources very well.
Although, you know, to Jesse's point about getting pass tokens mid-turn, I mean, you know, getting a pass token off of that attack can make a big difference. If that's the difference between whether or not you get to move, remove a marker and they get to react to it, that's a point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and never mind the fact that, I mean, if you don't end up having to use them for whatever reason, I mean, just the initiative bonus is enormous. I mean, like, if you're playing against Youko, she's always pretty much going to be going first every turn because of the number of pass tokens that she gets. That's not necessarily the case in Brewmaster. So giving him yet more activation or yet more initiative control with all those pass tokens is dangerous.
In a perfect turn, she can generate 3 pass tokens a turn.
Yeah, definitely.
In the perfect turn.
Well, way more if she's in Tri Chi.
Way more if she's in Tri Chi.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
In a Youko crew.
In a Youko crew, perfect turn. She's generating 3.
Yeah. So let's get to those bonus actions. So first one, she's got Boring Conversation. This is the same one that's on Zip and Tannin, and I don't know, maybe something else. 6-inch aura, stat 6 with a built-in crow. Very important. Target 13, so you need a 7. Until the end phase, when an enemy model within range declares a non-walk action, it must pass a TN 10 willpower duel or the action fails. She's got 2 triggers, both on crows, so they're both built in. Hangover, discard a pass token, drop a scheme marker into base contact with this model. Great. And Private Stash, this model heals 2 and gains poison 1. So, nice little self-serving trigger. Heal 2 on an incorporeal model is going to help them stay up pretty well, especially with the built-in suit. And then Hangover, because you're probably activating her early in the turn, discarding a pass token, that's a relatively high cost. I don't know that you're going to do that one too often, but there might be some other interactions or tech pieces that I'm just not picking up on. But Boring Convo, super strong for anybody who's ever played against Zip. It's infuriating, and especially in Yoko's crew, with the widespread access to distraction auras to put your opponent on a negative flip, it can be absolutely crippling.
Yeah, that and a geisha is just gonna make your day awful.
Yeah, this is a thing you need to plan for if you're up against them, because it's going to be a huge gotcha. You're going to lose the game. Like if you run in there and they Boring Conversation and you're on negative flips on your willpower 5, you're going to lose the game.
Yep, most likely. So her next bonus action, Slurred Speech, also a 6-inch aura, also a stat 6 with a built-in crow, with a TN of 12, so it needs a 6. Until the end phase, after an enemy model within range cheats Fate, this model may discard a pass token to reduce the value of the cheated card by 3. It's got a trigger on a crow. This model, Drinking Problem, this model gains poison 2. And on a ram, Making Conversation, one friendly model within 3 may heal 2. So that's the same trigger that's on her Biting Insult. So in the game that me and Jake played, tried to get this off and failed 3 turns in a row. It didn't actually come into play until turn 4. But in that turn 4, it made the difference between one of my models getting killed by Archie and not. The other thought that I had on this, and this almost came up against Adam, is if you get Shojo within a 6-inch aura of your enemy's summoner and they don't think about it and declare a summon that's too high, and you ditch a pass token to reduce the value of their cheated card by 3, bringing their 12 or a 13 down to too low to actually summon the model, that's brutal, because they're spending a summoner AP and a high card, and they're getting literally nothing for it. And that's one of those things that's like, it's going to potentially create some bad situations, I think, because at a tournament table, somebody's going to say, oh, well, I would have just summoned a different model. And you're like,
but you didn't.
But you didn't. So where do we go from here?
Again, though, it's going to be one of those gotchas.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you don't make the same mistake twice.
And then you're never going to let her anywhere near your summoner. And then I think honestly, what's more important
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about this model, is if your opponent is familiar with it going into the game, then chances are they have ways to counter it or just be aware of it. That doesn't mean that it's not going to be effective. I mean, it's only 6 stones and you're going to force people to play around it or to change their strategy, which is great. But I definitely see it as sort of a gotcha model.
Yeah, I mean, you're using Slurred Speech, I think, just because for the built-in trigger to give her poison 2. That's what you're doing, because that's, especially when you're playing her with Tiangong, that's really going to be the only way she gets her poison.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. It's exactly. It's guaranteed poison, and I mean, there's a couple of like the Making Conversation trigger on her Biting Insult and Slurred Speech. She can heal herself with those. For a flat 2, so like flat 2 guaranteed heals on an incorporeal model are definitely going to help with keeping it up. I mean, this is a model that creates basically a 6-inch no-fly zone for your opponent. Mm-hmm. And they either have to stay out of her area of influence or they have to kill her. And she's not that hard to kill.
Yeah, here's the problem. She's 5'4".
She's not super hard to kill, but I mean, if she's taking attention off of other things, and she's got incorporeal, but I mean, I think in our game, I killed her with 2 hits.
Exactly.
And I think in our game, I just ignored her entirely.
Pretty much. I mean, she died towards the end of the game, but yeah, it was. Yeah,
I think the rogue necromancy splash damaged her with his shooting attack, and then he charged her and killed her in 1 hit.
Yeah, this is a model that, when you look at it and you look at all these crazy abilities, you're like, this is the most busted thing that I have ever seen in the game. It does so much crazy shit that there's literally nothing else comparable in the game, too. And then you see it on the table and you realize that you can just kind of kill it or just kind of stay away from it. And then it doesn't do anything. The other thing about this model is that it's a support model that does not deal damage, that is competing for early turn activations. So when you're playing this model, unless if you want to get really full use out of it, you have to use it very, very early in the turn, like first or second activation. Ideally, you're going first and using this model right away so that you can get the auras up and create that kind of exclusion area. If you use her towards the end of the turn, she's not going to be very effective after your opponent's beaters have all gone and the other critical models have all gone. So
I think she's a pretty solid buff to a Brewmaster crew. And the other thing we have to think of too when we're looking at these is a lot of times we don't even consider them with the first versions of these masters either, so how they're going to play into Brewmaster 1, how they're going to play into Youko 1, because they don't have to play with the second title masters,
Exactly, and that's definitely something that we're going to talk a little bit more about that on the deep dive episode. But how these models fit into the original crews is not really something that I think too many people have been talking about. Everybody's focusing on the new masters, and I'm very excited to talk about the originals.
Yeah, I think I do think she's pretty solid, a pretty solid buff bot and a Brewmaster crew, and I think she does add those valuable pass tokens to the Brewmaster crew because there's so much poison you can stack her on her, where she can actually use that to get the pass tokens. I mean, it's going to be way harder to do in Ki and Gong, but in Brewmaster, I mean, she can net you several pass tokens a turn.
Yeah, I mean, literally passive pass tokens. You're not even really spending very much AP to get poison on her.
You're actually getting it off of their AP, just because you were able to stack with your splash poison.
I think you see her more in a Brewmaster crew, and I think she brings something to a Brewmaster crew that it doesn't have already, whereas she doesn't do that. She doesn't do anything except maybe boring conversation and her tacticals. She doesn't bring anything to Youko that she doesn't already have. And as for the tacticals, I mean, I know there's all kinds of cute stuff you can do with those auras and traps you can set up, but you just got to keep in mind when you're building lists and you're like, oh, Soho is going to be so great. A, she can die pretty easily, and B, your opponent has things they can do too. Yeah, you can set up a boring conversation bubble, but they've probably got ways to pull their models out or push you away or something like that,
Right. Yeah, it's not a intractable area that you just can't do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a very good point.
It isn't bad. It's definitely good, but don't go into the game thinking I've got this thing that is a Death Star,
Yeah, I mean, she would be awesome if she was a henchman. If she could stone for the triggers that she needs, she would be awesome. But she can't stone. She has the enforcer problem, which is a bunch of great triggers, and you can't do anything to get them. So that's, I think, where she is. I think 6 is a good cost for her. She does some stuff, but she's not overbearing by any stretch.
Yeah, 6 points. I mean, she's got a lot of stuff going on for 6 points.
Yeah, the difference between this and most 5-stone models is almost laughable.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool. So, time to talk about the man, the myth, the legend, the Brewmaster, Moonshiner. My own personal favorite. His OG Brewmaster is one that I don't play as much as I really should. for a couple of reasons. He has some weaknesses that make him a pretty bad match into a couple of different crews. This Brewmaster, I think I'm going to be playing him kind of a lot. And I don't necessarily know that it's because he's drastically better. He's just incredibly fun. I got to play this one against Adam, and I have to say, this is probably one of the more fun masters that I have ever played in the game.
Yeah, he was interesting, and you know what's funny is he actually plays the way I think a drunken master should play. So for me, it's a lot of the rules really reflecting the fluff, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, original Brewmaster is playing the barkeeper, and this Brewmaster is playing like Jackie Chan style drunken master. So let's get right to it. So he's a stats 6 defense, 5 willpower, 6 move, size 2. He has 11 wounds. And one thing I forgot to mention on the other ones, he's on a 30 millimeter base. All of these models are on 30 millimeter bases. So his front of card abilities read as such: Barroom Brawl. After a friendly Tri-Chi model moves, it may reduce the value of its poison condition by 1 to have an enemy model within a 1-inch pulse of it suffer 1 damage. Each model may only suffer 1 damage this way per activation or end phase. So this and one of his other front of card abilities, which I'm just going to skip to next, are his probably 2 defining abilities on his card. You look at that and you say, wow, that's some irresistible ping damage. That's cool. I didn't realize how much irresistible ping damage it was going to be until I actually got him on the table.
And here's the thing, combined with the next ability means you're doing damage on your activation, on their activation, and it's just happening. It's just passive.
Right.
So
getting to that next ability, we've got Tipsy Slide. When a model within 8 inches an 8-inch aura would suffer damage from poison before reduction, move it up to a number of inches equal to the damage that it would suffer. So anytime that poison ability resolves, which is going to happen in the end phase, or there's a couple other things that can resolve poison early, you get to move that model equal to the damage that it would take. So if they're at poison 1 through 3, they're going to move an inch. Poison 4, they're going to move 2 inches. 7, 3 inches, so on and so forth. And that's going to be any model, not just enemies, or not just friendlies, rather. It's going to be any model.
Hey, Bayou players. Hey, Bayou players, come in close. You've all been looking for an answer to armor? Here you go.
Yeah.
This is a fucking answer to armor.
We already had an answer to armor. Her name was Ma Tuckett, but people didn't seem to recognize that. This is an even better answer to armor.
So here we look at it again. This is during the end phase when people are taking poison and you're bouncing things around, and now you're taking damage. So
essentially, it means you're taking poison damage, and then you're taking another poison damage.
Yeah, because all your guys are moving around.
Yeah. And because it happens in the end phase and it happens before scoring, if your enemy, if one of the enemy models happens to have even poison 1 on it, and it's standing next to a ley line, or it's standing just barely in range for a claim jump, you're just moving them a little bit passively, no resist, denying points. It's amazing.
Or moving your models out of engagement for different schemes or in.
Yep. Yeah,
it's really good.
So getting right to his next ability, another movement trick, he has Butterfly Jump.
Yeah. Hey, this is during their activation when they're attacking you.
Now they're taking damage.
Yeah,
they're attacking you, and he's pushing next to him, and they're taking damage. It's great.
Yeah. And then he's moving to another model that's within the butterfly jump range, and he's making them take damage.
Yep. Absolutely. So he's got Drunken Kung Fu, which is the same thing on the Moon Shinobi. When this model performs a flip, it treats all positives as though they were negatives and all negatives as though they were positives. So that's damage flips, attack flips, negatives from concealment, distracted, everything under the sun. It's an ability that Shenlong used to have, and he was errated not to have, but that's because he had some busted attacks and still has some busted attacks. Brewmaster's attacks are not quite as oppressive. The Drunken Kung Fu is a really nice touch, and I think that they balanced it fairly well with the effect of his attacks, which we'll get to in a minute. But it's still a very, very strong ability.
It's very good. It seems busted when you read it when you read it and you're thinking of Brewmaster's old attack, you're gonna go, what? No, but yeah, it's not. I mean, it's good. It's good.
It's very good. Yeah, and
But it's
another
not
cool
busted.
thing about it, another cool thing about it is that to a certain degree, it actually reduces the amount of card pressure on you. Because you want to tie your opponent on attack flips. You want the double negative damage flip to turn into a double positive. So there are a lot of times where you're cheating in lower cards
To match them.
Yeah.
Or if you're activating him towards the end of the turn, you're not as reliant on hitting those big flips in order to get positives or straight flips on the damage.
You're going to be on positive more often than not.
Yeah, almost always.
Almost always.
Yeah.
And the only time
So-
you're not is when people are cheating in low cards, and then you just cheat in low and tie. So
Exactly. So moving on to his next ability, he's got high tolerance, reduced damage for this model suffers from poison to 0. And then he has lasting liquor. This is a new ability. The poison condition cannot be ended or reduced on friendly models within an 8-inch aura by enemy effects. So
that's huge.
Huge. You don't want your models poison to get knocked off. You probably have some models that relatively passively, the way that this crew works, are going to have 6-8 poison on turn 1. This crew hands out poison way more efficiently than regular Brewmaster does.
And I think in this crew, since I think with the first Brewmaster, you're almost using the poison more offensively in a way. Like you want to spread out the poison to them. And in this, it's more you want to spread the poison onto your models to buff them. So not being able to pull that off is huge.
Exactly. Putting poison on the enemy models is going to happen, and it's great, but it's not as much of a focus for this Brewmaster. In the old Brewmaster, you wanted to get Brewmaster to like poison 6 on turn 1, and no other decent models in his crew used poison for anything aside from Fermented River Monks, and quite frankly, they don't really see a super lot of play in Bayou. I know there's some players that have great luck with them. In this crew, you want poison on all of your models. All of them. All the time.
Yes.
When your model runs out of poison, its damage potential and movement potential actually get tanked.
Brewmaster, it goes back to what I was saying about these masters playing in a different style, and this Brewmaster plays in a much different style, as we'll see with some of his other abilities. And, well, you can see it already, but he's going to bring in slightly different models from the Brewmaster 1. It's a really great design, and we see it over and over with a lot of these masters. It's really cool.
Yeah, I may be a little biased. I think that this might be the best redesign that I've seen.
I'm going to have to go with McMorning.
Oh, he's busted. Shut up. I don't want to see him on the table. All right. Moving on to his back of cards. So his melee attack is Shiner's Staff. It is a 2-inch engage. Great when paired with Butterfly Jump, mind you. 2/3/4 damage track. Then push either this model or the target up to 1 inch in any direction. He's got a Drunken Confusion trigger where this model and the target both gain Distracted 1. And he has a Crow trigger, which is built in on his stat for Smashed, target gains Poison 2. So there's kind of a lot going on with this ability. The mask, obviously, giving Distracted is enormous. It's going to help protect him, and it is a positive for him instead of a negative. The push this model or the target up to 1 inch in any direction is either going to push your opponent out of their 1-inch engagement while still being within your 2-inch engagement, or you're pushing Brewmaster within an inch of them, which is effectively increasing the damage that he deals by 1 at the cost of a poison.
And it's also a separate damage source, so that's
exactly
taking out like a hard to kill model.
It's a separate damage source. So we're talking 2/3/4 plus 1. So it gets around hard to kill. It helps partially get around armor.
Yeah. And you have the built-in trigger to get the poison 2, so you're still doing a net gain of poison 1.
Right.
I mean, in a bubble, you hit someone with this attack, they're taking 2, then they're taking 1, then in the end phase, they're taking 2 more.
Yep.
That's...
They sure are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're taking 2 more because you're probably taking Popcorn Turner, and him and Apprentice Wesley, the totem, both have 8-inch auras that increase the damage dealt by poison by 1. So yeah, you're probably taking 2. You might be taking 3.
Well, I mean, depending how many times you hit with this, you can stack up the poison 2, 4, 6 in one turn.
Yeah, definitely.
But like you were saying, that's not, you don't need to get a bunch of poison on them. I mean, it's great, but
yeah, it's just in that particular instance, it's just it's built in. I mean, why not take it? You know, and because there's still other models that have blood poisoning. You know, so granted, if it's not here, I mean, somebody else has it, and it's still large damage source. You know, one shot.
So his next attack is another round. It is an 8-inch range, stat 6, looking for a 12, so it needs a 6 to go off. Shockwave 2, willpower 14, poison 2.
It's a big willpower duel.
Big willpower duel. And poison 2, no damage. No damage. Then, models that failed to resist the shockwave for the first time in this activation resolve their poison condition as though it were the end phase. Friendly Tri-Chi models may choose to fail this duel without flipping.
Hey, that's another plink.
Yep. And it's so here's the thing. It's potentially multiple plinks because if you land it in a ball where there's enemy and friendly models, if the enemy models fail, they're going to gain poison 2 and they're going to resolve their poison. So they'll actually only gain a net of poison 1 and then they're going to take 1 damage. Potentially more if they have a bunch of poison stacked on them. If they're up to poison 6, they're going to go up to poison 8 and they're going to take 3 damage and still gain a poison.
Yeah.
Then, for all of your friendly models that automatically fail, they're going to gain poison 2, and then because their poison resolves, they get to resolve Tipsy Slide, the front of card ability, to move, and then reduce their poison and ping you for more damage.
So they're going to end up not gaining any poison because they're going to resolve their poison condition. So it's going to
they're always going to gain a poison because it's poison 2, and when poison resolves, it reduces by 1.
Correct.
Right, but Barroom Brawl also reduces it by 1.
Yeah, but that's Barroom Brawl is on your models.
Oh yeah. If you trigger, if you choose to trigger Barroom Brawl, on one of your models, then they're going to gain a net 0.
Yep,
they're going to get a move, and they're going to ping your opponent for 1 damage.
Correct. Yes, right. And the enemy's going to ping for 1 and keep 1 poison on them. Right. Yep. So I mean, you're either flipping or cheating a high card to get past that high willpower, or you're going to be plinking a bunch of damage,
or you're doing both. Yeah,
and let's say you have Shojo in the crew, and she's got that 6-inch aura where if you fail that high willpower 14, you're going to gain an additional poison, or she's going to gain a poison.
Ugh.
Yeah.
And then you're resolving the poison condition as though it's the end phase. So if you have Popcorn Turner there, or you have, Wesley,
you're taking you're taking +1 damage.
Yeah.
Oh, it all adds up real fast.
Yeah. And I mean, the fact that you can do this multiple times is insane.
Right. Mm-hmm. So
it won't hit Barroom Brawl multiple times, but it will end up hitting the poison condition.
Yes, correct. Then you'll be able to spread it out, and I think this is a good AP because it's both a buff and a debuff in the same AP for your models.
And we haven't even talked about the triggers yet.
Oh, they're both great.
So the triggers, he's got reposition, move this model up to 3 inches. So again, you're either pushing him out to the 2-inch engagement, or you're pushing him in to ping more damage. And he has running tab once per turn on a ram. Remove a scheme marker touching a pulse generated by the shockwave, pulse 2. If you do so, add a soul stone to this crew's soul stone pool. So he's got an 8-inch range, shockwave 2. So really it's like an 11-inch range to have an effect, and then also potentially remove a scheme marker and gain a stone. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Pretty good.
I mean, there are going to be times where you might want to just use this to remove a scheme marker.
Correct.
You know?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's a very efficient AP point. It does a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of his key ability.
I think it is the best AP that he can spend on his card.
It does so much with 1 AP.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, it's literal chaos on the table when you see one of these things go off in a mob of models.
Because you also have to remember too that not only are you putting poison on models that want poison, not only are you plinking people for damage and putting and moving their models, you're also able to move like all of your models. So you're moving, you're just moving guys. It's got movement shenanigans. It has a buff. It has a debuff. It has a way to get rid of scheme markers. I mean, it has a way to add soul stones. It's
the total package
for a 6.
Yep. It's one thing that gets forgotten a lot with a lot of this stuff is I feel like people focus too much often on how it can hurt other models, how it can damage stuff. I mean, in Gaining Grounds 3, that's not how you win games. You win games by
Gaining
scheming.
Grounds 2.
Two, sorry.
I hope it's the same way in 3.
But I mean, this, like you said, it's the complete package. Like, yeah, it's got a bunch of ways to plink people for damage, but it's also got a bunch of ways that are going to actually help you score points.
It will almost always be a good AP to use.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, absolutely. At the low cost of a 6.
Yeah,
pretty good. And it's one of those that, like, even if you don't hit either of the triggers, it's still a great ability.
Yeah, you're still getting so much out of it.
Yeah. So moving on to his tactical actions, he's got Drunken Clarity, 8-inch range, reduce the value of the target's poison condition by 2, drop a scheme marker within 1 inch of the target. So there is no resist, there is no flip. It just happens.
This is going to win games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Because it's not enemy. It's not enemy either.
Not enemy. It can be. He can do it to himself.
Yep.
He can do it to any friendly. He can do it to any enemy. As long as they're within 8 inches and have some poison on them, they're getting a scheme marker next to him.
He can do this 3 times last turn.
Yep. Sure can.
Yep. Yeah. Crazy.
Yep. So moving on to his last ability, it is his single bonus action, Open the Gourd.
It's so good.
It's so good. So it's an 8-inch range, 7 with a built-in crow, needs a 12, so he needs a 5 for it to go off. Target a non-hazardous marker or a friendly Tri-Chi construct. Until the start of this model's next activation, treat the area within a 2-inch aura of the target as hazardous poison 1. It's got 2 triggers. One's on a crow, which he does have built in, Private Stash. This model heals 2 and gains poison 1. Or swift action on a mask, take this action again.
He's using it on the whiskey golem.
He's always using it on the whiskey golem.
Super secret tech.
Yeah. So whiskey golem was already an auto take with Brewmaster. Whiskey golem is a faction MVP in my opinion. I have taken it out of keyword on many occasions, and it always does work. And now it's a 50 millimeter base that's hazardous poison in a 2-inch aura. It itself has an ability on it called Beer Goggles, where when if your opponent attacks it and they have poison, they have to discard a card or be at a negative flip on an armor 2 model.
Yeah,
with a really good stats.
Yeah, so they always have it.
What ends up, yeah, exactly. And then because so the thing where this ability lasts until this model's next activation is so unbelievably good. I don't think there are very many of those abilities left in the game at this point. You saw a lot of them in 2E, and there really aren't very many, if any, others in 3E. Very much like Youko, Brewmaster is a model that you're going to activate probably last or next to last every turn. He doesn't have any really, really high impact abilities that aren't going to be just about as good towards the end of the turn, aside from maybe another round. His melee attack is good, but it's not like totally off the charts good. Drunken Clarity is something that you're going to want to be using towards the end of the turn anyway to drop the scheme markers. And what ends up happening on first turn is you kind of deploy with your Whiskey Golem right up front. You open the gourd on it as his first action to give it the poison aura, and then maybe you hit a swift action to give it to like a Whiskey Gammon, which, surprise, surprise, you take Whiskey Gammon with this crew, and you didn't take them almost ever otherwise.
Yay.
New model. So now you have 1 or potentially 2 hazardous poison 2-inch auras on the table, and then he uses another round, and all of your models choose to fail, and they all gain poison 2, and then they all resolve their poison ability. They push within the 2-inch aura of the Whiskey Golem and gain more poison. Now they're losing a point of poison when they activate, or when they resolve. What do you call it?
It's a net
Another
of 2.
round.
It's a net of 2, though.
So, but it's a net of 2, and then when they activate, they start using like moonshine dispensers and shooting poison at each other, or the Moon Shinobi charges and then gains a point of poison because he charged from inside of this Whiskey Golem's aura, and if he's still within 2 inches of the aura, which he may very well be at that point because your whole crew has started to move up the table, he's swinging at Brewmaster and giving him 2 more poison, and then the Moon Shinobi is gaining another poison from being in the aura. Like, I think in the game that me and Adam played, I didn't really try super hard to hand out a ton of poison, and at the end of turn 1, I think Brewmaster had like 8 poison. There was a Whiskey Gammon with like 7 poison. There was a Moon Shinobi with 6 poison. Everything else in the crew had at least 4 poison. Yeah, it was kind of amazing.
Yeah, and I think if you can do the setup in turn 1, you can get enough poison out where you don't really have to worry about the engine anymore after that.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you stack it up to like your 6, 7s, and then you're using it as you plink around. And oftentimes when you're triggering that off anyway, you're gaining poison still. So
I think the important thing to keep in mind, we talked about this a little bit in our kind of chat leading up to this. A lot of Brewmaster players, and it's not just Brewmaster, I see it with Riva players and anyone who wants conditions on their own models. They tend to sacrifice their entire first turn to try to build up whatever engine they need, and that is almost never actually worth it. It's a trap. I mean, you can sit there and you can build up 20 poison on your model. You really can.
Yeah.
But you've lost an entire turn. And while you were doing that, your opponent was moving into position, moving scheme markers, dropping markers. Like it's you need to get your resource that you need, in this case poison, while still putting yourself in position to score those points. And Open the Gourd allows you to do that.
Yeah, you're
Right.
able to get it passively just by doing what you would normally do.
Getting it passively. That is the key. Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, if you play a regular Brewmaster crew and you do the poison stacking game, you dirtle, exactly what Jake said. You dirtle around in your deployment zone, you stack poison a bazillion onto a bunch of models, and you haven't done anything first turn.
Mm-hmm.
This crew builds up its poison and moves forward at the same time. That's the critical thing. And like, especially the Whiskey Gammon, which usually you wouldn't take them because you have to dedicate more AP to putting poison on them. They have a front of card ability where at the start of their activation, they get to push a number of inches equal to their poison value, and then they can pulse out some poison to friendly models near them. So one of my Whiskey Gammon sat on the leyline marker in me and Adam's game so that I could score it first turn. And it ended up getting pushed up with Brewmaster to gain a poison. It used its moonshine dispenser on the other Whiskey Gammon to give it 4 more poison, and in the process gained 2 more poison itself because it was in the Whiskey Golem's aura. And then the next turn, it used an AP to toss the marker to the other Whiskey Gammon, who at that point had 8 poison on it. And then when that Gammon activated, it got a free 8-inch push and then 2 6-inch walks. So it got all the way to the other leyline marker and just its activation. Like, the amount of speed that they can put out is terrifying, and most of the poison gain is relatively passive while you're doing other things.
Yeah, and what else is nice too with the Whiskey Gammon is you can do so many little plinks with it now, because it'll start its activation and just push, and then it'll discard a card, you'll take that damage, and then it'll attack you and accidental rollover and take another plink damage, and then take a shielding off, and then take another plink damage. So they're solid little models now with him, and I think that if you're not, you should be putting it on the golem at all times, but golems die because they're a big target. And these are just like little nodes of poison that you can stick anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that accidental rollover trigger is really, really good. It's really good against your own models when you need to push through a big fight and in the process do a bunch of little plinks of damage to everyone. Yeah.
And then one thing to remember is that Popcorn Turner also has that same trigger on his attack. And he's very fast and has lots of ways to move around. He's got the 8-inch aura for the +1 damage. He also becomes the only source of blood poisoning, the bonus action that McMorning and original Brewmaster had to target an enemy model, and it takes damage equal to its poison value up to 5. So that, I mean, Popcorn was always kind of like a situational hire with original Brewmaster, and I think he's an auto include with this one. Whiskey Gammon you didn't take very often at all unless you really dedicated AP to it, and I think they're auto hires.
So I just realized that Popcorn Turner ability with Tipsy Slide is if you're targeting if you're not killing them with it, you're moving them a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because the
because it's
blood
poison
poisoning
damage.
does poison damage. They take damage from the poison condition equal to their value.
Yeah, so
yeah.
it's 5 damage and a 5-inch push.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I believe that the interaction works this way because Popcorn Turner also has that front of card ability for +1 damage from the poison condition. I'm pretty sure it actually goes to 6.
Nice.
I'm pretty sure that interaction works. So if you guys can't tell, I'm pretty excited about this Brewmaster.
I mean, if you put 12 cups on one of those on a whiskey gammon, they're just obnoxious little models.
Super.
Yeah.
Because they'd have that diversion out, and then like they're twitchy too. So then they'd be able to plink there. I mean, there's so many different.
Yeah. So funny story. I played in the game that I played against Adam. I took 12 cups of coffee on my Moonshinobi, who was in the middle of the table engaging multiple models every turn until it died. And because I never take 12 cups of coffee on minions, so it always ends up on masters, I never used the minion only ability the entire game. I never said that I was good at this game. Just a little just a little disclaimer there.
So
but yeah, every time an enemy model within a 6-inch aura ends its activation, if you put it on a minion like a Whiskey Gammon or a Moonshinobi, they get to push an inch, doing get more damage.
There's a lot of really crazy interactions. This is one of those crews that you're going to need to play a lot before you unlock it and remember every aura and every interaction. Like there's so much to it. Like and those are the best kind of crews in Malifaux, to be honest. Like crews that you can play and initially see something cool, but the more you play it, the more you sort of unlock.
Yeah, for sure. Any other closing thoughts from either of you on the Brewmaster, Moonshiner?
I have 2 questions about your game. Adam, I'm sure you've played against regular Brewmaster a lot. I personally think regular Brewmaster can be kind of a negative play experience, and I'm wondering if you feel like this Brewmaster is, I mean, not better or worse, but more fun to play against.
Yeah, so I think because he's more Brewmaster 1 is a debuff master, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's doing. This one is more geared towards buffing with the poison than he is debuffing. It can be annoying, but it's like annoying in a fun and cool way because it's what you imagine like a drunken master to be doing, right? Just bouncing around everything and doing damage while he's falling all over the place. And the drunken kung fu was a huge problem in 2E, and it was kind of what was the problem with Shenlong in the start of 3E. But I was concerned about that going into the game, and then playing into it, I was like, oh, Brewmaster's damage track line isn't big enough where it's really that much of a worry. And he lost the blood poisoning, so the single attack big damage dealer that he used to have is not there.
I think that's a good point because like the way that he used to play was, he's got this huge, gigantic aura where he's handing out slow if you've got poison 3 or greater, and he's engaging you at 2 inches, and he has 12 cups, so you can't bonus, and he's attacking you at stat like 8 on his attack, and he's using a focus and hitting you for 6 severe, like it's when original Brewmaster works right. I think you're absolutely right. It is a negative play experience, and I don't think that this one falls into that same trap.
No, he's totally different.
My other question, he's got a lot of little tiny moves. Another round alone is going to take a long time to resolve. Did you guys feel like the game went slow because of all the crazy shit that Brewmaster is doing to the table?
Not really.
Yes.
I don't.
I thought it did.
I don't think it did. And I don't think it did, taking into account that it's a new master and you're just trying to figure things out in general. I don't think it took entirely too long. I don't think it was, the length of the game wasn't because of all the little pushes. The length of the game was just not being familiar with the model.
That's fair. I think my turn 1 took a little bit longer than I expected it to, but we didn't really engage each other on turn 1, so it was more just me trying to figure out my setup and stuff. I had done a lot of like practice with him initially to try and figure out how to do the turn 1 unpack, so that really helped. I think turn 2 went pretty slow, but it did pick up after that. I think once we got kind of the hang of it.
Yeah, because you don't even know what you're doing with the model right away. You're still trying to figure out the order of operations for the engine and stuff like that. To be fair, I think in our game it was a little different, and I don't think it got like the impact of the whole Brewmaster situation, just because like it was a bad matchup, but unintentionally, but it was a bad matchup.
Yeah. Adam played Tara, just because he likes Tara, and I don't think he chose her as a tech pick. And she has a lot of willpower attacks, and the Brewmaster crew with the Whiskey Gammon and the Shojo and the Apprentice Wesley, there's a lot of willpower 3 and 4 in there.
You can't move your models around if they're buried, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then like
it was bad.
And like he would need the Whiskey Golem to be the focal point to get all the poison, and then you just bury the Whiskey Golem, and then it's just and then like a lot of it was just him having to pitch a lot of cards to pass the glimpses, and then not having the cards for his target numbers.
Yep. And like the way the game played out, like Adam won. I think he won by what, 2 points? Was it like 6-4?
Yeah,
I think it was.
I don't remember.
But even then, even with the bad matchup, I think each of us only had like 2 models left on the table.
Yeah.
Like it was pretty bloody.
Yeah, it was a lot.
And the whiskey golem lived until the end of the game. Hooray!
It did.
That never happens.
Wow. Yeah.
I know.
Well, I hope that on your next episode, you and Maeve talk about how we should defeat Brewmaster, because I'm a little scared.
So here's the thing. I'll tell you this. I was afraid going into this whole title thing that there was the risk of power creep, because you're making something new and you want people to buy it. So you tend to make it a little better. And looking at the masters that have been released and playing a lot of them, because we've been playing the leaked ones. We've been playing them and seeing how they work. I mean, the track record isn't crazy. I mean, like these two games were close losses, but I mean, it just shows that they're balanced, and I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
There has not been a lot of creep in these titles that I've seen.
Part of it is you got to take into account the newness factor for Jesse playing these new masters against us who are playing masters that we have played hundreds of times, so he that's a big deal. I mean, there was a bunch of things he forgot in our game because it's all new, and and it's hard with both of these masters. There's a lot to keep track of, and I think that as people play them and get better at them, you'll start to see some of them kind of come to the top. But I agree with you. I don't think anything is really busted. I think it's a really well balanced release.
Yeah, and I particularly like that. You can tell that the focus was to give them a different role than they already had, and to make them polish the turds in the faction. The models that weren't being used. You can see the obvious connection, like Brewmaster, for example. Now you toss a Whiskey Gammon in just because they're just really solid with them as far as being platforms for spreading out the poison. The other thing I've noticed with these new masters is a lot of them tend to be great second master hires, and work really well with each other. And I don't know if that was intentional or it wasn't. But there's a bunch of them that are coming in that don't have that typical, if this model's the leader caveat.
Yeah, we've seen. I think Yoko is the first one we've seen with that.
Yeah, but like Brewmaster, for example, it's based on the keyword. It's based on try cheat. So if there's other models in there, and he's not the master, he's a secondary master. Those try cheat models still benefit from that.
Yeah, and I think that the keyword synergy that they've done for the most part, they've done a good job at just making sure that it's tied to the abilities of the master rather than like flat out restrictions on the front of their card, like saying like Qi and Gong only um or that kind of thing. Like Brewmaster's a good example. Like you could in theory play this Brewmaster into pretty much anything, but you're going to lose out on a lot of stuff like the Tri-Chi constructs, and you're not going to be able to hand out poison as efficiently. So there's nothing that's just straight up like anti-synergy with him.
Yeah, I think a bunch of these are coming off as self-sufficient, and they put out enough of the conditions or whatever they need for resources to be able to do what they need to do. But again, it's not a bad thing. It's more of a I'm wondering if they did it with that in mind, so you see more two master games or.
All right, so I'm going to put both of you guys on the spot. Just a quick question for you. So, Adam, what is the single master that you are the most excited to see, be it released or unreleased at this point, just in theory? Which one do you want to get on the table the most?
See, it's tough because I'm transitioning over to a new faction, so I haven't really played any of them. I'd like to see Pandora. I really want to see what they're going to do with her. I think she's probably the one I want to see most on the Neverborn side. On the Outcast side, I love the new Vix. I love them. I think they're fantastic. So,
yeah, that's one of those that I think is a clear head and shoulders above the original for sure.
Yeah.
You have more experience.
I don't want to say.
Them,
I don't want to say it's not, but I mean, it really is. I don't see when Vix 2 isn't better, but I mean, it'd have to be really situational.
Yeah. How about you, Jake? What are you the most excited to see?
Well, I already spoiled it. I'm a Rezer player, and I think most people would agree that McMorning is the bottom tier when it comes to Rezers, and I'm excited to see this new McMorning in action, and how he brings a different play style to his keyword, and kind of helps to make up for some of its shortcomings. So I'm excited to kind of get him on the table and try to unlock him and really get some crazy synergy with those upgrades. And
there's so many,
so
many unknown combos right now.
Crazy stuff that they can do.
Yeah. And you know what the thing is, he's really exciting, and there's a lot of like really cool tricks that haven't even been like figured out yet with him.
Yep.
But even then, when we played our game, it was a really good ability, but it wasn't broken.
Right.
And
right.
it felt really fluffy. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of these, if you're kind of a Malifaux vet and you played in second edition, you can see how a lot of these titles are like when they had the different upgrades that made masters do different things. So my hope is like, let's say with Pandora, like there were two upgrades, and one was one that gave out paralyze, and then the other one was made her more of a beater. So I'm hoping that this title makes her more of a super debuff master, and maybe like summoning off it like her other one used to be, or something like that. It's just something. I really hope that continues.
And Jake, you're dipping your toes into Arcanists as of like what, last week? So
yeah.
What about on the Arcanist side? What are you the most excited about there?
So we haven't seen as many Arcanists as we have Rezers, but Adam said at one point, he made a good point, which is I think that some of the really good masters aren't getting amazing variants. They're getting cool variants that do something different, but they're not crazy powerful. I feel like Sandeep currently is crazy powerful. I'm really curious to see what they do with him that's different. I want to see Sandeep the nuker instead of Sandeep the summoner.
I would like to see Sandeep them do more with academics than they do the elemental side. I'd like to see a
Yeah.
reason. I'd like to see a reason to take Kudra. I'd like to see a reason to take the guard. You know.
Yep. His keywords are a great example of keywords where there's quite a few models that just collect dust. You know, usually you see the same list over and over again. So yeah, that would be cool to see some new Sandeep lists.
Point of order. Arcanists have actually seen 5 masters at this point.
Oh,
they're
yeah.
tied for the number 1 spot.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. I'm I was only a little bitter until I got my Brewmaster spoil because Bio was really lagging behind on the reveals, but we're on the up and up now. We're good.
Oh yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah.
So I would say for myself, Brewmaster was the one I was the most excited to see, and he did not let me down. I've espoused his virtues this whole time. As far as the other factions that I play, I do play a good bit of 10 Thunders. I was very excited to see Youko. I think, quite frankly, I'm even more excited to see what Masaki turns out to be, though. She's recently turned into like my 10 Thunders Bay. It is probably the master that I enjoy playing the most in that faction. She's original Masaki is incredibly fun, and I cannot wait to see what they do with new Masaki. I'm hoping that they go like the crime boss angle with her, just because she already has crime bosses in her keyword. They don't really get used that much. There's some other stuff in faction that doesn't really see as much play that kind of works with that like organized crime angle. So I'd like to see him do something with that. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, and I mean, again, a lot of these titles are departures from their originals, so maybe she's less, assassin and more buffs, more support, more business ventures,
Maybe she's had to take on the mantle of leadership within with I can't even remember what they call it, within the cartels or whatever they call it, but in Thunders, maybe in more of a leadership role, kind of like we've seen with like Anya and Tony. So that'd be cool.
We've seen a lot of like we've said, we've seen a lot of masters that make things that don't see play. So question for you guys, will we see an outcast master that makes the desperate mercenary good?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, if there's going to be anybody that makes a desperate mercenary good, it's probably going to be Zip because he's Bayou too. So I mean, he needs to bring the style into the Outcast faction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Meh, Adam says. And on that note, let me check the call sheet and see if we missed anything. I don't think we did. No, we're good. So just one more quick plug for the Beletsky YouTube channel. Again, I will link to them in the show notes. Make sure you check them out. As of today, I think I might have seen that Third Floor Wars has some sort of secret reveal that might not be on the reveal calendar scheduled for this Tuesday. So definitely check out their page. It looked like it might be on their YouTube live stream on Tuesday night, if I recall correctly. So again, we're going to be releasing our next episode the Monday following this. So this episode's being released on Labor Day. Our follow-up Part 2 episode is going to be coming out the following Monday if all of my recording and editing ducks fall in a row. And with that, we'd like to bid you adieu. Thanks for joining us with this content reveal, and thanks again to Wyrd for putting this out to the community. It's been really, really awesome. So as always, keep your conversations boring and stay weird, folks.
Wait,
and that really has like a double meaning on this one, huh?
Yeah, I want to do a quick plug.
Oh, do your plug.
Well, we got we're in the planning stages of the Malifaux Content Creators Invitational, the MCCI. A large part of the Malifaux game is competitive in nature, but a lot of times there's usually a team format tournament that people go to, and it's just usually a blast. We've had Alt Showdown in the past. Back in my Warhammer days, it was bragging rights. They always bring out the best, and they're always a lot of fun. In this case, we're challenging the other content creators involved with Malifaux to come down, get some games in. It's a team battle style and see who reigns on top. So we've Malifaux content creators have been the standard bearers for the hobby, especially through the difficult times of the pandemic. and continue to bring you content and keep the community going. So I think it'd be a great time to get together, share some of our stories and our tips and tricks, and really give you guys something to watch and pay attention to.
Yes, thank you for reminding me, Adam, that we were supposed to talk about that. Just a couple of quick notes. The preliminary plan is for the Content Creators Invitational to be held at Captain Con in Warwick, Rhode Island in February. We're still waiting on confirmation from the con at this point that they can accommodate us. I do believe they'll be able to. The initial plan is that it is going to be a Friday event, and then I'm also going to be hosting a 5-round 2-day Gaining Grounds tournament on Saturday into Sunday. So if there are any content creators, be it podcasters, YouTube channels, bloggers, or anybody else who works with the community that is interested in putting together a team of 2 or multiple teams of 2 for some of you bigger podcasts or content creator channels, please let me know so that we can start putting together a guest list. Ideally, I'd like to keep it to a 1-day event. And then that would allow all of those content creator teams to then compete in the Gaining Grounds event with all of the other Malifaux players and fans that are sure to come out for it. So cross your fingers, hope it pans out. I'm pretty confident that it will. And if that's the case, we will see you folks in Rhode Island in February.
Yeah, Captain Con's a pretty established con at this point. It's been around for several years. It took up the mantle from Temple Con. And they used to have a large team tournament for War Machine. Since then, there really hasn't been a marquee tournament or event, and we'd like to merely make the MCCI an annual marquee event there.
Right, absolutely, and it's a great location, great hotel, plenty of space. It's I think gonna be a really great time for the community at large. So
make sure you bully all the other content creators you listen to and tell them the chicken if they don't answer our challenge.
Yes, so let us know if you want to come. I'm going to be sending out messages. Adam's going to be sending out messages so that we can try and rally the troops. And again, I say keep your conversations boring and stay weird, folks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
This is the longest edit
Yeah,
of all time.
At least it's all in one spot.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure we won't make any other mistakes for the rest of the episode.
No.